in progress. We definitely have several requests for the recording of this. People are really interested, Kate, in you and what you have to say and the topic and your experience. And um, we're so happy to work with Kate. Like I don't know, Kate, you've done a webinar with us the last, like, I think maybe 3 years or 4 years, and we partner with Everyday Ambassador, the website and blog and way of life and book that Kate founded and is behind. And it's been really fun to see our different unofficial ambassadors published with Everyday Ambassador over the last few years, and it's been great to hear Kate's just perspective on being a good egg abroad and connecting with people and being able to share that experience with people while it's happening and when it comes home. And as you guys know, that's such an important part of our mission is sharing this experience. So it's not just about you and the people who you meet, but informing your communities and people who you're close to about what it is that you've seen and done and how we can change how people look at the world. And so Kate is expert at that. I put her bio in the chat box, so I'm not going to read it out to you, but Kate's worked and spent time in I think most of the countries that you guys are going to. We got Tanzania there, Indonesia, where Kate spent some time as well. So she knows the places that you're going to too. I thought, Kate, before I would turn it over to you, I would ask each of our unofficial ambassadors or our outgoing unofficial ambassadors to introduce themselves to you and say where they're from, where they're going, and what they'll be doing there. So why
That would
don't
be
we do that,
wonderful.
and then Kate will be all ears. Aubrey, you want to get started?
Sure. My name is Aubrey, and I go to Arizona State University. I'm going to be a senior this year. I'm originally from Sunrise, Florida, and this summer I'll be working in Tajikistan at IROTA, which is an NGO that serves families in the community with children on the autism spectrum.
Christina, go ahead. Let's just go straight down the line.
Okay. My name is Christina. I'm originally from New Jersey. I live right outside of Philadelphia, and I go to school in Maryland, McDaniel College. I'm studying exercise science and Spanish. I'm headed to Zanzibar this summer to. I'll be teaching biology. So.
Am I next? Or
Yep, Isabel, go ahead.
I can't tell, sorry. I'm Isabel Perez. I'm from Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia as well. I go to school at Queen's University of Charlotte, where I'm going to be a junior next year. And I'm going to Indonesia to work with PKBI, which is an affiliate of Planned Parenthood.
I'm Rachel. I go to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I'm from Tallahassee, Florida, and I will be going to Morocco, and I will be teaching English for a good bit, and then French for a little bit after that.
Great, thank you guys. Kate, go for it. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Sure. Well, it's really nice to meet everyone, or meet you, or video meet you. And first and foremost, I'm just so excited for you. I'm so excited. If I know you guys are gonna probably keep your mics off, but just raise your hand if it's your first time abroad. Awesome. Very, very cool. And so basically, what we're going to be talking about this evening is effective blogging, effective writing while you're abroad and during this experience. And I'd like it to be a little bit interactive, so I'm definitely going to be sharing some thoughts with you, but I'm also going to have some questions for you, so feel free to turn your mics back on for that. So to start out, what I'd love to actually get a sense of is what your expectation is and what you're kind of planning to do in terms of writing. I know that there's a little bit of before, during, and after, but from each of you, if you just want to have like 30 seconds or so about what writing means to you or what you think it's going to be good for you during this time. We can just go down the line in the same order.
That's me first then, right? Yeah. So writing to me, I guess, is my main way of expression. Um, and I guess what my goal is this summer with not only like the AUA blog, but with sort of spreading the message and being an unofficial ambassador is to use my writing more effectively to do that, because I feel like a lot of times I can be very passive where I'm just sharing words that I relate to as opposed to being a little more active with it. So that's my goal.
I
Awesome.
think, oh, sorry. I think for me, I get a little nervous when I think about writing, actually, because like when I was younger, people used to say like I wasn't a good writer, but then someone would read the exact same thing and be like, "Wow, you're a great writer." So I used to be like, I don't know, like, so definitely I'm gonna challenge myself to sort of change my own perception of writing because I do like more spoken word type things. So that's usually my mode of communication. So writing, I'm gonna just challenge myself to sort of change the way that I look at writing, and I think in doing that, I might be able to change the way that people like read my writing and sort of what my message becomes by changing my perception.
Um, I am used to writing research papers, so more communicating what I've learned than really educating people about my own experiences. So I'm really excited to learn how to write and translate what I've seen and what I've learned myself to other people.
Gotcha.
Sort of similarly to that, actually, I really like using writing to reflect. Like, I think it's, for me personally, just the best way that I can sort of process whatever happens. But I do it so little because I do it so much for classes or research or what have you, at least do journalism. And so I'm looking forward to using it more, sort of having to reflect and then doing it to the best of my ability.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, I think that you all bring up really wonderful points, and I think that probably most of the cohort that you're a part of is feeling pretty similar right now about the types of challenges they're facing. And to be honest with you, I'm someone who has authored a book about topics of global citizenship and going abroad, and still, whenever I put material online to be shared with the world on a blog, I also kind of think, like Christina was saying, a little bit nervous about, is this really going to communicate the message in the way that I want or not? As Aubrey was saying, it's really important not just to be passive about thinking, what was I doing, but really active thinking about what does this mean? What does this mean for the person who's reading it? What types of things would I like to open their eyes to? And then also, as Isabel brought up, the idea of some of us are used to writing different formats, so research papers or scientific writing or other things, and that might not be what resonates with an audience. And so you bring up awesome points. Thank you so much for sharing how you're feeling about it. And I hope by the end of this webinar, I've helped boost your confidence a bit and feel more focused about kind of tips and tricks for doing that type of writing before, during, and then after your experience. And so there's a few different kind of points that I wanted to get across to you over the course of this webinar. I suppose I should just start by giving a little bit of context. Ben gave a great introduction, and I just wanted to add to that that Everyday Ambassador is a book that was actually published 1 year ago today. Today's our 1 year anniversary, and so it's very special we're doing this today. And basically, the reason that I wrote Everyday Ambassador is because I spent several years doing AUA type of work, so being a volunteer and working abroad in places where I was not from, where the culture was different from my own, and feeling as though, similar in a way that Ben felt when he founded it, that sometimes we go out in the world and you're told that you have so many differences with other people or that things are so foreign, and then you actually see quite a lot of similarities. And when you can identify those things that you share and the common ground you share with other people, that ends up being the foundation on which you can build solutions. So whatever the trouble is that you're trying to help out in the community, some of you are teaching, so maybe there's gaps in education. Others are helping with technology projects, so trying to get people access. Whatever the thing is that you're trying to solve, it's usually those connections you make with other people and the common ground that you find that really helps to build a foundation on which you can build solutions. And really, Everyday Ambassador, the book, is all about drilling in why relationships matter so much and exactly why relationships end up being the foundation of the solutions that you're going to be bringing and engaging in these communities you'll be working in. So as a brief overview, Everyday Ambassador focuses on 4 key values to building those relationships, and those are empathy, focus, patience, and humility. They are, of course, not the only 4 things that matter when going abroad and meeting new people, but they are the 4 that I found to really be the most helpful and the most useful in really getting to know people. And so as you can imagine, empathy first and foremost, trying to live life in someone else's shoes, see their point of view. Patience is important because, as you will all learn, and as I'm sure you've learned in other parts of your life, sometimes when you're very excited and enthusiastic about going somewhere to do something, things can feel like they're not moving fast enough, or that you want to have an impact and it doesn't seem like it's happening quick enough. The idea of focus, again, it's like you have so many different things you would like to be engaging in. You're going to get to this new place, and there's just so much that's going to be stimulating you about your new environment, new things you're learning. How do you kind of learn to focus on actually just building relationships with people? And then humility, of course, the last one is figuring out, some things you are all going to bring as pieces of expertise to the communities you're going to be working in, and they will be grateful for the expertise you bring. A lot of other things you're not going to be experts in, and that includes the language that you're going to go speak there, the local cultures and customs, and possibly even some of the solutions needed to improve life in those places. And so that's not a bad thing. It's fine. We all have strengths and weaknesses. We all have things to work on, and it's kind of understanding those things before you go that can be really helpful. And so, so as it sounds like for many of you, for me, writing is really a powerful way to reflect on these types of things. And during the course of your time abroad and on this trip, you're going to, of course, have opportunities to blog and to write publicly for other people, and you're also going to have opportunities, of course, to write for yourself in your own reflective writing in a journal. And those 2 types of writing are quite different and complementary as well. Before I continue on this point, I just actually wanted to pause and ask if anyone had any questions about the Everyday Ambassador 4 values, or about the philosophy, or anything related to that before I go on. Seems straightforward. Awesome. Cool. So when it comes to your writing for this trip, the kind of one first point I wanted to make was just this idea of distinguishing private versus public writing. And I would really encourage you to actively engage in both of those throughout the course of your trip. So private writing in your own journals is kind of the space you have to really just put things all on the table, whether it's okay if it's passive, it's okay if it's just your own style of what makes sense to you. It's really just getting a chance to think about what's going on around you, document things that you might not remember later on, and synthesize those all together. And for me, anytime I go and write publicly, the first place I go back to is my journal of what I was thinking, what was going on during a certain day, and then modifying that for the audience that I'm writing for. When it comes to public writing, this is something I want to chat with and hear from you guys about. Who do you envision you're doing your public writing for? Who are some people you're writing for when you do this?
I guess other people, students around my age, who are thinking of maybe visiting the same place or doing the same sort of program.
Great. Okay, that's a good one. So you're going to be writing for your peers. So other people who maybe are already doing these things, or who haven't yet gone on a trip like this but are interested in doing so. Good. What else?
Think I just got back. I was in Peru, and part of our goal was we were blogging about our experiences, and so one of the things that we came across was our family members were on there all the time, and we loved that. We were really happy that they were following our adventures and our journeys. But we were all, I was with a group of 11 other students. We were all a little like, how do we reach other people? Like, we want the people who might disagree with us to get interested in what we're saying, to get interested in like our story. So, but definitely family. I think my family will be on there all the time. But I think trying to find ways to get like that other crowd was challenging.
That's an interesting point. When you say people who might disagree with us, who are some of those types of people, and what do you think they disagree about?
I think I've I've encountered it. I'm glad you asked. I actually just yesterday, was talking to my uncle about traveling, and I'll be in Tanzania. So I said, yeah, I'm headed to Africa this summer. And his initial reaction was, why? Like, what are you doing there? And I had to kind of like, take a minute to be like, well, I think it's important to make these like cross-cultural connections and learn. And I know that I don't know a lot going in, so to know that I will learn probably more than I will teach. And I think just like that idea that traveling abroad and making those connections with people who are maybe, I don't know, have a different religion or a different language or things that we don't understand.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have thoughts about people such as like this uncle figure is totally someone who's just in everyone's family. Everyone has that uncle.
Yeah. I love him, but he's just too effective.
It's true, and it's very true that when people some people are just kind of naturally gravitate towards this idea of global citizenship and the value of being in the world and learning about the world. And other people might be not as excited about that. And what are some reasons you think other people maybe aren't as excited about it?
I can similarly. Oh, sorry, Rachel. Do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Kind of similar to Christina's point about family. When I said Tajikistan first, it was where is that, and then it was why, and then it was lots of whys. And you go to like a family function, and there's like 30 old people staring at you, interrogating you about your reasoning for wanting to do this. So I guess I don't know. Like I want to sort of spread that form of I don't know, like knowledge and give them my experiences and have them understand that it's not something that's so far removed. And I think that's like my target audience when I think about what I'm writing for. It's funny, like, yeah, your grandma's going to read it, but like there's a reason I want my grandma to read it. It's not just because she like loves me and she's going to read it because it's on Facebook, you know. Sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, no, that was beautiful, Aubrey. Thank you for sharing that. That really resonates a lot. Rachel?
So I guess particularly with AUA, I mean, obviously, like when people have biases that sort of are on the Islamophobic tendency, those are sort of things that are really hard to change with a blog post, let alone get people to have like these ongoing biases to want to read the blog post in the first place. And those are the people that like are sort of like the perfect people that we would like to sort of affect with just like, no, like these are just friends that I made. It's not black and white sort of things. That is definitely like the perfect, like the goal, but is like definitely hard to reach based off, I mean, definitely like based off what Christina said earlier, like it's hard to reach these people.
And I think if I can add like one thing that I didn't mention earlier about my uncle is I said to him, because we were kind of like arguing because that's the relationship we have, and I said, I think that you're afraid because you don't understand it all. And I said that I don't understand it all. Like I know that going in, and that's a huge reason why I'm going. And I think we were kind of bickering, but I wanted to tell him like it's okay that we don't understand. It's okay that you don't understand, that I don't understand, but like we can do something with that. We can learn, and we can. I think that was like, I wish that we had talked a little bit more so I could say like it's okay to be afraid that you don't understand, but you have to sort of or I have to do something proactive to, change that.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think that's an excellent point that fear is a major driver in why some people end up having fears, having things like Islamophobia or racism, or feeling uncomfortable about other parts of the world, or having suspicions or paranoia about other things going on in the world. Of course, some of these fears are really well founded. There is terrorism that goes on in the world. There are some bad things that go on in the world. But as we know, as you will continue to learn in your experience with AUA, there is so much beauty in the world. There's so many wonderful things in the world. There's so much more to be in awe about and enjoy about than there is to be afraid about. And so your blog posts really are going to be a very powerful tool in the audience that you're aiming to reach. And I think that your direct families, and not just your direct families, but anyone who they might pass it on to, as goes with Facebook, when one person shares it, other people see it in their networks, and someone might have a similar mindset, groups of people have similar mindsets, and so what you're writing is going to impact a lot of people, and is going to, as you guys said, it might not immediately change someone's mind. It might not suddenly convert them to the idea that global citizenship is amazing and everyone should be traveling abroad, but you really are going to have powerful opportunities to at least plant the seed of starting to open someone's mind to a new idea, and it's a very powerful thing. And so as you're thinking about how you're going to be crafting this writing and how you're going to be sending this message, one key thing to think about, and one thing that we talk about in Everyday Ambassador so much, is really putting yourself in the shoes of the other person, and what they would be hearing. So communication is a two-way street. You can say things, and then there's what people hear from that. And the best you can do to kind of put yourself empathetically in the place of the person who's listening, the more you can do to write a message that's going to resonate. So you can tell a story several different ways, and that's going to resonate differently with different types of people. So I think it's very wise that you all already clearly are aware of some of the concerns or preconceived notions that people have about the places you're going. As you said, people might not even know where they are on a map or where they are in the world. So at a baseline, you're actually just introducing people to another place, period. But then as you continue writing and they continue reading, you're actually going to take them with you to see it's not just this foreign place that's so different and so scary, but there's actually a lot of things here that are similar to the things that you care about, and a lot of things that people here care about or are worried about that you care about and are worried about, and trying to draw those similarities and build those bridges for them. And so one thing I know that I always try to do with my writing is you can't please everyone, you can't write for everyone, but I do try to think about who the audience is, at least the audience whose mind I would like to change, or whose mind I would like to influence in a positive way. And so really kind of, that can be hard to do sometimes, because you're here having this really eye-opening experience, you're getting close to people, you're enjoying your time. That can be a hard thing to replicate exactly. And there are a few things that I think help to try and replicate that experience for someone else. But before I share my thoughts on the tips or tricks of what I think helps resonate with people, I of course would love to hear if you all could put yourselves in the shoes of your family members, of your peers who maybe aren't yet convinced about global citizenship and its importance. What are the things you think they care about that would be interesting to them, or that would cause them to keep reading on?
I think one thing, I come from a pretty small town, and there's a friend of mine who I graduated with told me that our town was the best in the world. And I said, how many towns have you been to? And he said, not many. And I said, how can you say that ours is the best? So I think, but I was thinking about that one day, and I think that tradition, I think, is really important to people in my town that may have thoughts that differ from mine about global citizenship. So I think that if I were to talk about, if I were to connect traditions from another place to another country, that might be they might be wow, we celebrate something differently, but we both have traditions. I think that might it might be interesting for people to see that.
I love it. That's awesome. So you know that tradition is something that's important to your home, and certainly no matter where you go in the world, that's going to be a component of life in that place that you go. Completely. Another thing that I think can resonate with just about anyone is the idea of relationships and connections. And I think that sometimes when we're writing, we tend to kind of look at what's around us and you know what event we're doing or how we're feeling or how we're interpreting everything going on around us, and that's good. And the idea of you as kind of the center person to the story is a very good thing, because the people reading it know you, and so they inherently, of course, are going to care about you and want to read your story. But another thing that I find to be really powerful is if you speak to, in your writing, the relationship or relationships you're developing over time, over the weeks that you're in this place, and whoever it is that ends up becoming your best friend there, your closest friend, someone who you connect with, maybe someone who reminds you of your mother, who's like a mother figure, or someone who ends up being like a sibling to you. I think that when you kind of explain how you're feeling or how you're understanding the world around you through the context of this person from this new culture, from this new place that you've met, that can be a particularly effective way to communicate that. And so tradition is one. Relationships are another one. Is there anything else that, if you think about things that people would relate to, things that people would be able to?
For me, I think like learning about everyday sort of things are really interesting. Like, and obviously, like, there are things I don't know yet, so I can't pinpoint them. But I mean, even just like learning about French traditions and culture, just like little things like how they take their coffee in the morning, are easy enough to sort of digest the differences that you're not overwhelmed and focused on differences, but you're just intrigued. It's just different enough that you're like, oh, that's so interesting. And sort of like documenting just everyday little things that are different and sort of intriguing because of that, I think is easier to digest, but also sort of makes you hungry for more instead of overwhelmed by differences.
That's a really good point. A lot of the writing that you're going to be doing is pointing out things that are new and different and exciting. And while that is great and it's going to be very exciting for people to read, Rachel, you bring up a good point that if you have too much of that, then someone might feel isolated or they might feel like there's just no way I can really connect to this. So the idea of everyday things is kind of cool. And I'm sure that you have already either heard this or experienced it yourself before, but kind of it's oftentimes not until we really go far from home that we learn not just about the differences in somewhere else, but we actually learn to see our own selves, our own everyday things, our own traditions, things that we think are just normal. We learn, oh, this is just our way of doing it, and there are other ways of doing that around the world. It can be really difficult when you're just in your culture and in your environment all the time to appreciate and see that there are other ways of doing it, and to really get a grasp on who you are and how you live your life and what you do every day. And this, this is also going to come up as you're wrapping up your time and you're heading home. And I would love to ask you if any of you have had this experience before, where sometimes the most difficult part of this is as you're wrapping up and coming home, you are so enthusiastic and excited, and you've been learning so much, and you come back to a place where people did not have the experience you had and do not have the same enthusiasm you had. So I'm wondering if anyone wants to just share a little bit about that feeling. I saw Rachel nodding her head. I'm not sure if anyone else has had that.
I'll go for it then. This is sort of specific because it's not with the culture, so it's not exactly what you're talking about, but it's the same sensation. I went backpacking for a month, and it was with 12 people. So I mean, I was only with 12 people for a month, and our daily struggles and stuff were in like miles that we hiked, or the food that we made, or how if we were too cold or too warm or whatever. And when you come back, it's just like people ask you, "How was it?" And you say, "It was great," and then the conversation is like over. And in your mind, you're like, well, I want to talk about the grizzly bears that I saw, and I want to talk about all the miles that we did, and all of these things that like they're just not on the same page with. And it was sort of weird to sort of be able to reflect myself on it, because it got glossed over so easily with other people that I almost glossed it over, where it was like obviously really important, and like I needed to reflect on it more than other people did. So like similar feeling, but obviously different than cultures.
Yeah, for sure. So the idea of things that, I like the way you phrased it, like things that mattered to you or how you measured your days. we're very different. And I think that feeling gets even more exacerbated when you go to places like where you will all be going, which are oftentimes low income, places that are struggling with poverty or with other issues. And you kind of start to see the world as like, wow, even people at this level are managing every day, or the things they're concerned about are very different. And then you come back home and people are like upset that like a chocolate cake isn't on sale or something, like something that seems so bizarre to you after having had an experience in a really different place, and managing those feelings, and how to kind of communicate that after. And so, writing is a fantastic way to reflect on that, to put out your thoughts, but then also to think about how you're going to phrase those lessons and share those lessons with other people. Because as you can imagine, it sounds kind of judgmental if you're just going to come back and say to someone, oh, well, you haven't had the experience I've had, so you couldn't possibly understand what I've been through. And that's kind of like the key thing that we always want to avoid, when we're writing about experiences like this. We do not want to make anyone feel as though because they haven't had the experience that we've had, that they can't understand the lessons that we've come to understand. And for sure, going through things yourself and going to a place yourself and exploring it yourself is very unique and very special, and the learning goes deep and the learning becomes a part of you. However, at the same time, the power that you're going to have by being on this trip really is that you can communicate those lessons to other people who come from the backgrounds you come from, who come from the places that you come from, who live the same type of life that you have, but who have not had this experience. And you're going to be able to basically take them on that trip with you and give them that trip. And so, one key component, as we just summarized, is the idea of non-judgmental writing, and when I say it, so the idea of non-judgmental writing, can you guys think of like traps that you could fall into where you might be writing in a judgmental way?
Something that I always think is a really easy way to do that is maybe getting caught up in like, I don't know, like vernacular and like sounding very proud, as opposed to using like layman terms and trying to appeal to your audience more,
Yeah, absolutely. So you're all going to be in environments where you're going to be doing something very specific, building a specific vocabulary. In that, you're going to be learning other languages. We're literally developing a whole new vocabulary. And so you want to be like teaching that and offering that to people. But if it's if it's inaccessible, if it's in a way where people can't understand it, then they're not going to be able to connect with you. They're going to feel like, oh, who does she think she is? Like, she's just off doing that, and I guess I'm not welcome here. And so you're right, it's good to figure out how to translate some of what you're talking about into more layman's terms, into phrases and vernacular that someone is going to understand and feel comfortable with. And it might be different based on who you're writing for.
Another thing that I think of when for like non-judgmental writing is like I think there's a fine line between making sure that you are explaining things. Like, don't assume that people know exactly what you're talking about when you're talking about a particular event or place or anything like that, but not explaining so much that you are like belittling your audience to say like you couldn't know anything about this, like you haven't been here, you haven't seen it. I think like there is definitely a fine line between not assuming either way, but sort of finding that balance between making sure you're explaining things enough that people can get a sense of what the situation was like, but also allowing there to be thought for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely want to balance between that, and the beautiful thing about when you're blogging is you can always kind of refer somewhere else, someone elsewhere if they'd like to read more, they'd like to learn more, but you don't have to kind of put it all in everything that you're saying. But I love that sentiment. I think it's really important to not over-explain things to the point where someone's just going to feel like you're babying them, or and I think challenging people to kind of, rather than maybe talking about the specifics of the community you're in, or the specifics of the thing you're doing, which might not be something that they're going to grasp immediately. It's great to just generalize and universalize what it is that you've learned and what it is that you're hoping to offer them. So there's always going to be the beautiful, interesting details that are going to spice up your story and get people intrigued, but then really the lesson that you're trying to teach them, whatever it is that resonated with you, whatever it was that someone taught you, or whatever your eyes were open to, being able to share that in a really crystal clear way, I think is a good way as well. Any other thoughts about ways that we can sometimes fall into being judgmental in writing? So another point, I want to also just make sure I'm good on time. So Ben, are we going, what time should we go up until before we?
We're gonna end at 10, so I can go to bed. To be frank.
That's totally fair.
So it's up to you, Kate. You can take it to the wire, or we can do Q&A for last 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so. This is. I'm sitting here quietly jotting notes because this is wonderful and it's so interactive. So up to you.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, just wanted to make sure that was the timing. So let me just make a couple more points, and then let's just see if anyone has questions. Because it really sounds to me like you have a great grasp on the types of audiences that you're going to be writing for, and I encourage you to keep that in mind as you're there. And at the same time, the types of writing that you're going to do for yourself, which is going to be very different, like we talked about, but is totally going to play into the public writing you do. And it sounds to me like you're also aware of how difficult that can be to write for an audience of people who might not share your same belief set, because it can be tempting to want to write what your beliefs are, what your thoughts are, or how awesome something is to you. And of course, no one's going to hear that if you haven't put it into the context of what matters to them and what's important to them. And that's really what we mean by empathy with Everyday Ambassador. It's like a pretty deep way of actually putting yourself in someone's shoes. Not just, of course, when you go abroad, you're going to be doing that with the people you're working with, for sure. But the interesting thing about blogging and storytelling of what you're experiencing there is that you're also thinking about the people back home and how you're going to present this to them. Another point I just wanted to bring up, almost more of a logistical thing as you're writing, is that now this was different when I was starting my adventures abroad at a time when internet really was not available to everybody in the world. You'd really have to kind of go somewhere and find a computer where you could log on and write something. Nowadays, of course, as you guys know, everyone, no matter rich, poor, wherever they're from, like most people have cell phones, most people have Facebook, most people have access to the internet, and so you will be working with people who could very easily read what it is you're writing about your work there, about your community there. And so I think that's also a really positive way to keep yourself in check as you're writing. And again, this difference between the private and the public writing. When you sit down with your journal and you're reflecting, you can say whatever you want about anyone. If someone really annoyed you, if something was uncomfortable to you, of course, so many of the things we experience abroad are really positive and insightful and interesting, but a lot of them can be sometimes negative or scary or new or uncomfortable, and that's okay, and that's fine, and that's part of growing. But those are things that you write for yourself, and you want to be really careful about what you put online and what you say about different people, because even if you think someone isn't going to see it, my rule is just always assume that they will. Always assume that unless you are very good at kind of masking and protecting who you're talking about, someone's going to find out it was them, and so you want to make sure that you're writing in a way that's authentic and that you would be comfortable with anybody reading. I think it can be really tempting for foreigners, and I speak for myself as well, to kind of go somewhere and write about the community you're working in and how much you're learning and the characters you're meeting. But those are real people with real lives and families, and so you want to make sure that everything you're saying is put in the context that's really respectful of them. And again, regardless of whether you think there could be a poor farmer somewhere who doesn't even have a cell phone, you think they're never going to see it, just assume they will. Just assume they will, because they probably will. So yeah, I mean, to recap, basically what I really wanted to get across to you tonight is what Everyday Ambassador is all about, which is human connection and relationships. And so you're going to have so much you're going to want to write about and talk about in your writing during these trips. And the best piece of advice I think I can give you is to focus on human connection, to focus on relationships, and to try out this idea of storytelling through the lens of you're developing relationships with people in the community that you're working with, because that is a really cool mirror and reflection of the types of things that you're learning. It also provides a very engaging way for almost anybody to really understand what it is you're trying to say. No matter how foreign the place is, everyone knows what it's like to have a mother figure or have a sibling, so you can really hit home with that with a lot of people. So does anyone have any questions, like any questions at all that I could help with, anything you're curious about?
I have a question. What do you think the best platform to blog on is? Like websites or that kind of thing?
So for yours that you're going to be doing, I mean, I always use, things have changed since I was blogging there, but like I think now WordPress is something people like because it's free. Anything you can do for free if you want to set up your own blog, I would recommend. And so there's WordPress. I think there's other free blogging sites. Of course, now there's like Medium. I think Medium, a lot of people write on it, tends to be longer form. But for your own blog, I would just find the service that's free, that you can just send people the link. And then once you put some of these pieces together, as you know, AUA has a blog, Everyday Ambassador has a blog. There's going to be other places where you can publish your work aside from your blog as well. But I would make a home base for yourself to keep all your writing. Some of it maybe you'll want to keep sharing onward and publish elsewhere, but I think it's good to have your own home base for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kate, do you mind if I pull out a couple of things that I really liked about what you said?
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought that was a wonderful presentation. Not that you haven't done wonderful presentations for us in the past, but that was awesome. I mean, such a great overview of different things to think about, and like from the really psychological approach of what you want to accomplish with your writing, and the way it's going to resonate. There was a few things I was taking notes going along that I really liked a lot about what you had to say. One of them was this idea of private versus public writing, and using your journal as a way to challenge yourself and to record different things that are happening in your life and that you want to think about, maybe not necessarily talk about yet, but that you want to think about and remember. Sometimes just speaking from my own perspective and experiences, sometimes not even writing sentences in the journal, but just writing down lists and descriptions of places and just what it looked like or what it smelled like, and potentially being completely incoherent to anybody else who's looking at it, but that it's almost like a mental snapshot of where you were, what you were doing, and who you're with. And then using that as a jumping off point to making a larger message that's for a public audience. I loved how you talked about that. I mean, for me personally, I basically, I spoke English to as few people as possible for a year living in the Arab world and kept an intensive journal that I turned into a book. I set out to turn into a book, but it happened that way because that's where I was throwing up all my different ideas and recollections. So I love that idea. I think something that along those lines, that point that everyone is going to read what you have to say. Like you're never going to get away with putting something out there and writing about somebody else and not having it come back to them. And so you have to think about, if you're an everyday ambassador, you're an unofficial ambassador, you're a citizen diplomat, you don't want to be two-faced. And so if that goes to not having fun at other people's expense. Personally, in my writing, I like to have a lot of fun at my own expense. I think that self-deprecating humor is the best possible thing, because you're embracing your audience and you are inviting them in on the joke because it's at your expense, it's not at someone else's expense. But I did have this incredible moment where I wrote this book, and then I went back to Jordan in particular, and I gave people copies of the book, and like, you know, I had known them as like a scraggly graduate student, you know, and you know, I came back and I was like, here's a book that all this time that you were nice to me and hospitable to me, I actually was like taking notes on it, and I wrote a book, and here it is. And I had some really interesting conversations and moments as a result of that. But it always like comes back in that way. And so at its worst, you shouldn't be making fun of people. At its best, it's a pretty cool thing, because in that case, people really felt as if they had a voice, and they felt as if they were totally unempowered before about issues related to Iraq or war on terrorism, and like all the griping they did, someone had listened and written a book about it. And then the other thing that I liked was the way you were talking about, you know, how to make connections with people through the writing and to get your point across. And one of the things that I wanted to underline a little bit on that is the idea of giving your subjects a voice, and not necessarily putting yourself, as you said, at the center of the dialogue, but you know, conveying what other people have to say, quoting them, videotaping them in this era where you can just turn on your phone, videotape them, ask them a few questions, and embed that, and let the people who you want to share with your target audience back home, let them interact with them directly rather than through your filter all the time. And so I wanted to add that tweak in there. But loved your presentation tonight. That was awesome.
Thank you, and I second everything you said. I just agree. I'm always like scribbling, even in New York City, I'm scribbling little details of like things I overhear in the subway, or things, the way things smell. It's just those tiny details that you write in your personal journal make a big difference. And yes, I agree. You should be giving the voice to the people who you're working with. And you know, it's been great to hear from the four of you, and I feel like I know you're gonna have an amazing time, an amazing trip. I hope you're also challenged. I hope you have times during the trip that are a little bit uncomfortable at times, because those are really the times when you're learning and you're growing. And I love to, I guess, to make a little bit of a bigger metaphor out of what Aubrey said earlier, the idea of like going from passive to active. I think trips like this are all about really actively engaging, and really not just kind of standing and observing, which is a small piece of it, but really getting in there and getting to know people, becoming friends with people, getting to be part of the community. And I wish you all the best on it. And if there's anything I can do to help going forward, my email is kate@everydayambassador.org. And once you're all done writing, send some stuff our way. We'd love to publish it. So thank you all, and have great trips.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. And guys, I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You should read Kate's book. I mean, like, that's a great, I don't know, it's a great manual for, you know, sort of how to conduct yourself in doing this kind of work. And you know, the things she talked about tonight, they're in there, but there's a lot more. So something to think about either before or after you guys go. It could be interesting to reflect on after you come back as well, in terms of, and you'll say, why didn't I read that before I went?
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah.
This is great, and I hope that you guys take Kate up on her offer to be in touch, and I hope that we have some good pieces of work to send over to Everyday Ambassador to see you guys get published there.
Thank you.
Yeah.